Hello, welcome back to part two, where Tim and myself are going to be talking about what's actually changing in the boardroom with AI, and also circle back on, we've talked about this pack problem. Well, what can you actually do about this? And what are we seeing as best practice here? In this episode, we want to provide a picture of how directors are actually preparing right now and why the board pack is where the governance risk is being quietly accumulated, which people aren't necessarily thinking about. Tim, what's generally different about boardroom conversations now versus 2 or 3 years ago? Like, what are the stark things that are standing out to you?
Well, the biggest thing, I suppose, is stranger danger. Like, they didn't really know what
Right.
AI was, and they've heard of, this and that, and it's all scary, and it's data security, and it's too much. And when we were talking years ago to directors about using AI in the boardroom, it was fearful, right? And a whole degree of caution and skepticism. That's completely gone now. It's absolutely gone. And director land tends to be a highly connected pool. So once one board starts using it and profiting from it, it spreads like wildfire. So it's gone from skepticism to frustration that they're not getting tools fast enough.
It's interesting, isn't it, that underlying frustration? And I kind of think I'm seeing a bit of cognitive whiplash going on where boards are, in particular, because I've kind of got this view of sitting on boards, but also working with directors with Vizory. And what I'm seeing is it's kind of what we touched on in episode 1. Management teams are under more and more pressure, especially because of AI. Where's all the cost savings coming? How are you applying AI? What are the risks? All of that stuff. But from a executive team perspective. And then what happens is they tend to put more stuff into the pack because they're trying to give more updates and manage more of their risk, which means, again, the packs are getting even bigger, but also they're getting finalised later. So the directors have less time to review these packs that are increasingly getting bigger. So this circles is going round. And I think the potential risks are even bigger than ever because it's easier to miss things when that happens. It's this compounding problem that I don't think anybody's openly talking about, Tim.
Yeah, I think the bigger the board pack, the higher the probability that something will get missed, right? And
Yes.
giving people data is not giving them insight. And particularly if directors have to pick through years worth of data or years worth of board packs to find individual nuggets, it's unreasonable. And in boardland, you're actually seeing, particularly for prudential organisations, directors just not wanting to go on listed boards. They're not wanting to go on prudentially regulated boards because of this tsunami of information they actually have to process. A long time ago, Kirsten, I did a post-mortem on a very large public board, and this board was getting 1,600 pages of board papers 16 times a year, 3 days before a board meeting. So somebody like me is a very slow reader. You're probably a very fast reader, right? So no, so 1,600 pages of board papers is it's 80 hours of reading 3 days before a board meeting. So
Mm.
you do the
There's no
maths.
way
I
they've
can't
reviewed
I
it.
can't do
Yeah.
it. I can't do it. And then they're on 3 other boards. It it makes it impossible.
It's that common phrase that we've, I think you and I are both hearing from directors, Tim, in the sense of there's this unease that people feel they're missing something. They want to see these signals through the noise, and they're just not able to do it without tools and AI support there. So it's really becoming, I think that agitation is making directors push and say, okay, how are we actually resolving this? Because it's not getting better.
So in the pre-AI sort of phase, directors are pushing back and are asking management to, come up with shorter board papers or a real short summary of it. And what happened was originally, we would recommend that they do a 2+5, 2 pages to explain, 5 pages to complain about, the detail. And it just blows out and blows out and blows out, particularly if management's not confident of what the board actually wants. And the board actually has to keep asking for more and more information, as you've said, because they're just trying to figure out the noise.
From now, you mentioned that was a couple of years ago, what you would recommend, Tim. Like, what are you seeing a good board pack looks like nowadays, and how far are we from that?
We're a long way from good. You know, there's a lot of boards trying to push their board packs to say 250 pages, which is, and then you've got regulatory pressures around that as well. So they're really trying to use structures like their subcommittees to get through things, but it's difficult. It's an unenviable task being a director with the weight of the reading and the obligations that come with it. Yeah, a good board pack has lots of insights. It's not information, it's all insight, but also it's delivered well, right? So it's not just the information, it's how it's presented in the boardroom.
Mm.
And there are lots of AI tools that management should be using to help them be better in the boardroom.
But I'll be a bit provocative here, Tim, in terms of, and see what your reaction is to this. One of the, I mean, when I was looking at the jobs to be done for Vizory and what directors were trying to do, and the research that was coming up consistently was that there was kind of only three main things, only three things. And you think, oh, okay. And they wanted to know, is the business being managed well and are the risks under control? Right. So a section for that. Have the exec team done what they said they would do last time? Because that builds confidence and trust. And what's changed since last time? Not have to reread everything and just find the delta. What if the
Yeah.
pack looked like that? Is that just too conservative?
No, no, no. I think, and a lot of boards, actually, I should have said that. That's what boards actually want from management. And the other thing I'd probably add into that is what's keeping you awake at night? And the other question they tend to ask is what's not in the board pack that we need to know about?
It's kind of tipping that whole, currently they're designed for management to demonstrate coverage, not
Yeah,
for directors to govern effectively. And I think if people and exec teams thought about those three things and worked with the board around that and said, hey, these are the three things we're going to really think about. Does that work for you? And as you said, what's keeping you up at night, which kind of comes under that risk category, then, I think we'd get a different quality in board packs coming through.
100%. And given that that's the main ingredient for board meetings, it's really important.
And what do you think would change if directors actually were able to synthesize the pack rather than skim across it?
The quality of the conversation is going to go up, right? It's going to be more commercially focused. It's going to be aligned to the things that actually matter to the directors, and management will get more effective challenge. So if they're having better conversations about the things that matter, it's gonna impact purpose and profit. So shareholders profit from it eventually, right? If they have better conversations, better arguments, better discussions, better decisions should ensue.
I love that. That's the goal, right? And that's why you want a board in place with these seasoned directors with all this experience. The other interesting side of this, when people are thinking about these things, they also think about perfect behaviors or perfect practices that they wouldn't necessarily follow either. And so that's part of the balance too. And like an example of this for me was when we were building Vizory, directors would talk about how they really needed the tool to be able to go across previous discussions and decisions because they'd hear things and they were sure that management had talked about that before or that something was going to be due. And that was one of the key things they wanted out of our tool. And what was really interesting, and it was consistently said by all of these directors that we interviewed, like 40 before we actually ended up building anything. And what was really interesting is when they actually were using the tool, nobody used it. I love the concept. But in perfect practice, that sounded like the right thing to do. But it was really, they were just kind of trying to get to the signals as quickly as possible because of the time limitation.
And you do get, like, you do. I remember a story by one director, similar, where she spent the entire weekend going through 3 years worth of board papers because she knew management had mentioned this like 3 years ago, and she found it, right? And she went, aha, they've changed their story. So it may not be a tool that they use all the time, but they will use it.
Well, I think it's ultimately, do people actually want a better search tool or do they want the synthesis done to give them the real insight? That's kind
Yeah.
of the primary driver here. And I think that matters. It goes beyond board packs because it's a useful lens for how organizations should think about AI adoption more broadly. Because most people won't get value from AI simply because it technically retrieves information. They get value when it reduces that cognitive load and shortens decision time and helps them to focus on judgment rather than hunting for context.
Yeah, yeah. It's judgment that directors are actually hired for. not the processing power of them being able to read documents, right? It's judgment that everybody remembered. That's a good point. We actually often say to directors, everybody's hired for a particular skill. Nobody's ever remembered for that skill. They're only ever remembered for the judgment they apply, right? And that's based
I
on
love
insight.
that. It's a fantastic spot to stop that episode, Tim. So when we come back in our next episode, we're going to be really delving into where is AI heading. This is kind of the meaty, exciting one that you and I have kind of what we're seeing in industry, basically. So stay tuned for that one.
Thanks, Kirsten.